Welcome to the best of the Leon Charney Report. For over 2 decades, Leon Charney, one of the architects of the historic Camp David Peace Accords, has interviewed some of the most important figures in modern-day history. These interviews provide a window into some of the most significant events of the last 50 years. In this excerpt, recorded in March of 1992, Leon Charney interviews former Mossad agent Shmuel Toledano and former Israeli Army Brigadier General Yakov Even about their staged peace plan. A peace plan that's been bouncing around the Middle East for years.
We're talking with Shmuel Toledano, a former member of the Mossad. We're going to talk a little bit about that because it's a fascinating history. The Mossad is basically the CIA of Israel, but they do things cheaper and probably better. Don't criticize me now for that remark, Mr. Gates. And we have Jackie Evans with us, who was he is a Brigadier General Reserve and former spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces. What's important about both of these gentlemen is they've not come here to speak about their history, but about the future of Israel. And they have come up with what Mr. Toledano calls the Peace for Stages peace plan, and he'll explain it to you more. Shmuel, welcome.
Yeah.
First of all, a couple of Mossad stories. That always excites the American public very much. What did you do? For 11 years you were in the Mossad. What did you do?
For 4 years I was in charge of the operation of bringing Moroccan Jews to Israel. We brought about 90,000 Jews from Morocco to Israel. It was a tough job, a hard job, but we did it. For 4 years I was in charge of the department looking for Nazi war criminals, finding them, punishing them. Not all the stories were told. One day they will be told. And for
were you involved with the Eichmann trial too?
The Eichmann not, but others we didn't tell all the stories of all those who we found and punished, but there are many.
Is that right?
Yes. And for another 3 years I was in charge of the Jews in Latin America. The anti-Semitism there, we decided to help these Jews in Argentina, in Mexico, and we trained them and we taught them how to fight. And I think that because of that, anti-Semitism, the Jews in Latin America showed that there can't be anti-Semitism in Latin America. And for another 3 years I was in charge of all our nets in the Arab countries. Syria, Lebanon, Egypt.
What do you mean by a net?
Well, Israel had to find...
Network, you mean?
Yeah, you had to find people who will give you the right information about the Egyptian army, the Syrian army, the Lebanese army, the Jordanian army. And that's what I did for years.
I once represented a man you probably know very well. His name is Rusty Lutz.
Yeah, that was in Egypt.
The Champagne spy. 5,000 for one.
Yes, that was a failure, I'm afraid. But the trouble is that people don't know about the successes.
But why was Rusty a failure?
Well, at the end, after all, he was found, he was caught. But we had so many cases of people who did an excellent work, who gave us excellent information about the Egyptian army, about the Syrian army, and they were not caught and were not fined. Many of them were Israelis, many of them were foreigners, but the trouble is that we can't still yet tell the whole story. One day the whole story will be told of people, both Israelis and others, who sacrificed their life for Israel, for bringing the necessary information about the armies, the Egyptian army, the Syrian army, to save the state of Israel. And we did it for years. And unfortunately, we can't yet reveal the names of all these Israelis and others who did the job.
What do you think about all these books that have come out? First of all, Ostrovsky's book, The Renegade Mossad Agent.
Well, the Ostrovsky book is really... The book which gave the real story of the Mossad is Every Spy Prince of Melman and Dan Raviv.
Yeah.
They really told the stories of how we helped the Latin American Jews. They told the stories of the heroic actions we did in Morocco of bringing 90,000 Jews to Israel. They told the real stories of how we searched and found and punished all the Nazi war criminals. And this is the right book, the Every Spy a Prince.
I read it. Is it authentic?
So you can tell me, you can call me Prince Toledano.
Prince Toledano?
Yes.
We'll talk to Sheikh Evans now. Jackie, you were a brigadier general in the Israeli Defense Forces. You're probably still in reserve duty, am I correct?
Yes.
And you served in the infantry?
Yes.
How many years?
Oh, more than I care to remember, all my life. I'm a career officer since I was
3 years old?
sort of 16 years old. Went to
16
military
years old, you were
boarding
in
school,
Ghana.
then a soldier, then an officer, then retired.
Which wars did you participate in?
I started at 56 as a soldier,
Right.
just into the army, and my last active war was in Lebanon in '82.
Your last active war was against the press, no? When
Yes,
you were
well, that's
spokesman for
a
the
lifetime job against
Israeli
the press, and it's a war of the enemy.
The reason I'm bringing out your backgrounds is because both of you gentlemen have played an integral part in the defense of Israel, and yet you're out there now practically sacrificing your lives to bring about a peace plan, and that's why I think your past is really very important. I mean, you're not just leftist or rightist who came trailing in and saying we have an idea. Shmuel spent, he was an advisor on Arab affairs to 3 prime ministers, Prime Minister Eshkol and Golda Meir and Yitzhak Rabin, who recently won the Labour Party nomination. You rose to become a brigadier general, which is not a simple task in the Israeli Defense Forces. But you're not sitting here today to talk about your past. I wanted the audience to know about your past. Why are you here, Jackie? Why are you taking all this energy coming to the United States to propose some kind of peace plan? Why is it?
Because it is the most important thing that an Israeli can do today. I can't think of any other task that will even come near that. It's not a sacrifice. I think this, I wouldn't call this, it's fun, it's a pleasure, it's a duty, it's an obligation, and it is a lifetime course. If you mind about your country, you mind about your country. And I think our country needs most of all any other things to have a quick and reliable peace. And when I say quick, still it has to be achieved in stages, in a responsible way, in a reliable way. It has to be achieved by stages.
All right, Shmuel, you have an organization basically, correct? What's the proper name of your organization?
It's called the Peace in Stages. And the Israelis don't trust the Arabs. Every Israeli, if you ask the average Israeli, he'll tell you the Arabs will sign a peace treaty today, they will not honor it. I don't trust the Arabs. Every Palestinian will tell you, I don't trust the Israelis. You are suggesting autonomy for 5 years, not telling me what will be after the autonomy, and I know what will happen. You will annex me with my autonomy to the State of Israel. So the basic element of our plan is how could we force both sides to trust each other. Now, for the Arabs to trust us, we say that the government of Israel will decide today it will have no objection to the creation, to leaving the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, most of the territories.
The Israeli government will announce that.
Yes, this is for the Arabs to trust us. We'll give you a solid commitment. Israel will give you a solid commitment. We are ready to answer to your national aspirations 5 years from today if you will prove to us that you really mean peace. And what should the Arabs do during these 5 years, as from the day of the decision until the day of the implementation of the decision? The Palestinians should stop the Intifada, stop the terror, the Arab countries should stop the state of war. This should continue for 5 years. For the average Israeli who doesn't trust the Arabs, who is afraid of the Arabs, we tell him Israel is not moving an inch before the Arabs will show and prove for 5 years that they stop the terror, stop the intifada, and recognize the state of Israel and no state of war.
Any significance to the term of 5 years, or is that following Camp David?
No, the Camp David says we are giving you autonomy for 5 years. We are not ready to tell you what will happen after the autonomy.
Right.
We say we are not giving you autonomy for 5 years, but we are giving you a Palestinian state after the 5 years. So the difference between us and the Likud is that the Likud is ready to give autonomy now. We are not. The Likud is not ready to tell the Palestinians what will happen after the autonomy, so the Palestinians will not accept the autonomy. In our case, we have already the response of the Palestinians, both of the leaders in the territories, of the PLO, and even of the National Front. They said the peace in stages plan is the only plan.
You've spoken to Palestinians?
I spoke to Palestinians, but I have also the official communique. I have it in writing. The official spokesman of the PLO and Faisal Husseini said it openly. We do accept, it was said then the Toledano plan, now it's the peace in stages plan, because you are giving us after 5 years an answer to our national aspirations. On the other hand, you are right, you the Israelis, that you are not ready to do so before we shall prove to you that you really mean peace. Now we are not satisfied with these 5 years. And I suggest that you will hear from General Even what are we demanding for the coming 10 years after these 5 years.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. The preceding program was brought to you by Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.